Is this artist photo bashing or is this artist using generative AI in their art process? Well, this artist was called out on Threads, so let's delve into this entire situation. And again, before we get started, please don't send hate to any parties involved. So this is a post made on Threads by user CJF Mead, writing artist, no AI, the art, see below. I am so tired of these scammers. And please check to see if you're following the scammer. I said over 100 of my mutuals are. So this is a big thing that people kind of have been talking about in the art space. When artists have no AI in their bio, but that they actually do use, allegedly, generative AI in their process. In fact, some people have pointed out that it kind of seems like if an artist has no AI in their bio, it's more likely that they're using generative AI. Now, that could, again, be like confirmation bias, right? Because of the people that we've talked about, whereas there could be a lot of legitimate artists with no AI in their bio that are not using generative AI, but let's take a look at some of this artist's works. So this is one of the screenshots attached where you can see a redheaded woman with a cloak over her head. Now, she has long red curly hair billowing out from the sides. And there is one thing that you will see with like hair that generative AI draws, that it has a tendency to loop out and then loop back in on itself again, as if it has an entry and exit point. You don't often find hair doing that unless it's like a super coily hair texture, really. And here we can see she has loose waves, and there's loose strands of just it comes out and it curls back in, it comes out and it curls back in, making like O's in the hair. Now, again, this possibly could be like an art style choice, or this also maybe could be a generative AI paint over situation. What I find interesting is when you look a little bit closer, like there are a lot of elements to this art piece that look very painterly in terms of the clothing of the other woman, where you can only see her white sleeve. But then we have some interesting details, like again, the laces, the way the laces are drawn, they're not laced up in a way that makes sense. Over here, there's like an extra strand cutting across. Now again, benefit of doubt, this could be human error. They could have accidental extra brush stroke, left it in the art piece and didn't notice it, because once you zoomed out, you're not going to be able to see that anymore. Now, next up, we have what looks like a really ornate light stick sitting on the end of a banister. And this light stick is casting a shadow on the background. Now, the light stick looks pretty interesting because if you take a look at it, it looks pretty 2D. It looks pretty flat. But then as you look a little bit closer, it actually is like a 3D object. And you can see there is kind of like these extra light sticks on either side that would imply there is a depth to it that isn't visible in the actual drawing. Now, again, some benefit of doubt, maybe this is a limitation of the artist's skill. They were trying to draw a 3D object and it ended up looking kind of 2D, and they just kind of like struggled to walk the line between the two. That definitely could be possible. Here we have another piece, and this one is of a blonde woman and a dark-haired man. He's kind of like holding her in his arms, and she's just kind of standing there. There's a lot of interesting things happening with this art piece that makes me ask a lot of questions. Because again, there are some elements of this piece that when I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, well, this does look hand painted. There's like this really strong blue rim light added to the arm, the side of the skirt, etc. All of those to me do look quite painted on. Same thing with like his clothing, etc. He also has some pretty strong saturated blues in the clothing. And then we get to some oddities in the piece that have me scratching the back of my head. If we look at the guy, he's got heterochromia. One eye is this like really dark green, and the other eye looks very like hazily. They're two different shades of green. Now, potentially, this is a book character that does have heterochromia, or this could be a generative AI thing that tends to give people like a really dead and devoid looking stare, and that this is like a end result of that. And then there is the spears, I think, going across the woman's back, and I'm not quite sure how it's strapped in, but we do have that there. Notably, a big thing that I find quite odd with this piece is whatever's going on with the waist here, because looking at her body, unless it's like a piece of armor going around, it kind of looks like somebody took a bite out of her waist, because this is like the color of the guy's clothing in the back. Now, there is like a crisscross strap that goes all the way across, so potentially it is some sort of like corseting detailing on the waist that we can't see on the other side due to his hand obstructing it. So that's why it looks the way that it looks. So possibly it's like a human design choice thing. It just has me a little like, huh? Like I'm not quite sure what's happening here. But the biggest one is whatever's going on with this chain. So he's got a handcuff on one arm and a chain hanging off the handcuff that just ends abruptly. It's just sitting here and it's gone. Now, if it were a situation where he's like, I don't know, Silas from League of Legends, the unchained guy, the chains were cut, it would hang straight, from physics. The way it's swinging up like this, I'm just very confused as to how it's done like that. And the handcuff isn't on the wrist properly because there's all this billowing detail for the shirt. Like if the handcuff was applied over the shirt, the sleeve would be in the handcuff, not outside of the handcuff. So we kind of have that oddity going on. This is the last piece that OP has, but we'll look at a couple more. And this one to me is quite damning. Because if we look closer, there's a lot of weird stuff happening. This is somebody who is fully encased in armor. And when you look at the armor, there's a lot of oddities happening. Notably, there is a chest plate of what looks like a lion, except this lion, for lack of a better word, is deformed. And this is one of those, and again, like I always say this when it comes to like, is this generative AI? Is it like human art, right? A lot of humans will make human errors and AI will also replicate these errors. But when it's something that could be passed off as human error, for instance, right, if you just see one thing that's like, maybe this finger looks funny, that's not enough to be like, this person used AI, right? Because like human errors happen all the time because we are human and, anatomy is hard to draw, things are hard to draw. So some of the other things I pointed out earlier, like, okay, maybe like, the zigzag of the lacing, maybe you accidentally left an extra brush stroke and that's why it looks the way it looks. That definitely could have happened. But then when you get to some things where you would ask yourself, would a human draw this? And then the answer starts looking like a no. That's when we start scratching our heads a little bit. And it's like, okay, I think some nefarious things or maybe some generative AI tracing, etc., is happening here. And here in, again, this armor piece, there is a metal chest plate with a lion on it. And the lion is massively deformed. It has a nose and then a mouth and a fang coming out of one mouth. And the other fang that looks like it's supposed to come out of the mouth is actually coming out of the nostril. We got a fang coming out over here and another fang here. So then when you ask yourself, would a human put the other fang in the nostril of the lion rather than in the mouth? I really don't think the answer is going to be yes. Then we have other aspects. It looks like there's like some sort of like scarring or something happening in the fur of the lion. Bro's got one eyeliner completely on fleek and the other one, it doesn't match at all. And then some odd swirling details going on in the hair. So those are all looking a little finicky for me. But the even more damning one is when we look down here at the chainmail. And I've covered another artist who's also allegedly used generative AI that featured chainmail in the piece. They showed the layers and everything and people were still scratching their heads at the layers. But this chainmail looks really odd. All the chain links are just melting into each other. Like all the chain links here are all really garbled. All the chain links here are really garbled here and here as well. And it isn't one of those where it's like you grabbed like a chainmail brush and you like dragged it over a couple of times and they overlinked. This was like drawn and fully rendered with all of the chain links completely crushed into each other. That looks very generative AI, and that is an error that generative AI would make that a human simply wouldn't. It was fully rendered out like this. And then there's just other odd things that are happening. Again, this person wearing this suit of armor has a sort of like chainmail, like kind of like skirt attached to the waist and a really long cloth skirt that's kind of like dragging to the floor. And I don't know where this fabric is coming from. There is like a small sliver of fabric that comes from the belt and then melts into the skirt fabric that is also draping over the thigh. And fabric just doesn't work that way. So I don't know how they got this like watery drapey material happening for the skirt. And see, look, the fold is here and there's extra sheets of folding that is like appearing from where the boot is supposed to be. So all of that is just really odd. And then if you look at other artworks of this person, there's some other ones that are also quite suspicious looking as well. So here we have another piece that was made by them and it features a blonde guy in the back kind of staring at a blonde woman who is grabbing a crown out of a box. We have some things, the hair swooping back in, that could be like an artistic choice where they just did the brush strokes. That's a minor detail. The interesting ones I note are the bookshelves, because typically bookshelves is like one row of books, but we have one row of books and then another hidden row of books in the back that's a little bit taller and it's featured in all of the shelves. Again, this maybe is an artistic choice, but then we have like, again, rows of books and then another like short book on top of the stack of books and then more books behind those books. Typically, it's not how bookshelves work, but that could be one thing. But another thing that I find interesting is there's a magical box that she's grabbing a crown out of, except the box is not facing her. And typically if you take things out of a box, you would open the box facing yourself, not the other way around. That could also be an artistic choice. But the part that I find interesting about this is that the lid of the box is like astronomically larger than the actual box itself. The opening of the box is like, it's about this big, right? As we can kind of see here, right? I'm trying to draw that perspective out for you. But then the top of the box is like this big. It's like double the actual size of the depth of the box. So if you were to open it, the lid would completely overextend over the box. And looking by the way this person draws, if this is their drawing level, right? They could draw anatomy well, they can draw people well. I'm sure you can draw the lid of a box to be roughly around the size. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate, but roughly around the size of the box itself and not astronomically larger than this. This piece by them to me is the most obvious and pretty egregious one because as we take a look at this, and this was made in 2023, we have this woman over here, and she is a blonde-haired assassin. She's got a hood over her hair, and she's wearing an assassin-looking garb while kind of like chucking a bag of money up in the air. There's already a bunch of oddities that's happening here to me, where the bag of money kind of looks like a peeling onion. There's a hole in it, so maybe that's why the coins are falling out. She has a handcuff on her arm. And the chains from the handcuff, it looks like hair. Like the chains are all quite garbled together. But the really big one that's kind of odd is the detailing on the belt situation going on here. And if you guys know generative AI work, they love to add like a bajillion belts for no absolute reason. We have a belt here that has a belt buckle that also buckles into a separate belt over here. So it buckles into two belts. Typically, I feel like one belt, one buckle type situation is what happens. And then we have other things like this pouch hanging here. But the really odd one is this like ginormous glove that's hanging off the side of her belt, astronomically larger than either of her hands. Both of her hands could fit in here and there would still be plenty of room. Anatomy proportions, those are hard to get right. That's totally fair. But if you're able to draw like this, I'm assuming you could make the glove the proper size. Similar enough anyways, doesn't have to be exact, right, to match. And then we have her on the right, and once again we have interesting stuff happening, like a missing hand that's on fire. But on top of that, we have a hand holding a sword with 6 fingers on it. We've got the thumb, and then we have fingers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a thumb to make a total of 6 fingers. Again, it can be possible that humans accidentally draw an extra digit. It does happen. It's actually not unheard of. It does happen. But I already just showed you a bunch of garbled up chainmail and a line with a tooth coming out of its nose. So this is not making me feel confident that it was all human made. So going back to the call out post, they highlight the artist name as an artist named Cban Art. And other people are like, wait, no way, they did my book cover, etc. And the OP also tags a bunch of people being like, hey, I'm not sure what I'm seeing, right? Is this person only using photo bashing and painting, or are they also using AI? And a couple people have their 2 cents to add. A user called Dead Goals writes, I honestly agree that it might be all 3. Sometimes it's hard to tell because of Threads' image compression. You can't tell whether it's the app or the OG drawing having this weirdness. The corset on the 5th is photo bashing, but who knows what the image sorts, and the application is bad and it doesn't follow the form correctly. But the chainmail and the line on the 4th feel more like melting AI to me. Another account, Bookish Scammers Referral, responds, all of the above for me. This looks photo bash for sure, but there are AI elements also. And OP adds, they have sketches for some of them where they're trying to pass all of it off as their own work, not even honest about the photo bashing. And OP also adds these images in the comments for some more verification. And okay, it's always really, really funny when I see people draw like archery, bow and arrows, because I shot archery. I did it for 7 years competitively. Generative AI always mucks it up real bad. You can also muck it up bad and not use generative AI, I will add. The faces are kind of giving generative AI though. But looking at this guy, the way they're drawing the bow, the arrow, okay, this is just my pet peeve because I shot archery, but when you shoot, you don't tilt the bow sideways like that. That makes it a crossbow. No one fires a bow and arrow like this because it would be horrifically inaccurate. They're not designed to shoot this way. They're designed to shoot vertically. But secondly, the way he's drawing the bow back, he's pulling it back by the feathers of the arrow. And you don't do that. When you pull a bow back, you pull it back by the string, not by the feathers of the arrow. It will not pull the bow back if you do it that way. When you pull it back by the string, but your 2 fingers pinch the knock of the arrow, which is the end of the arrow. So that keeps it in place, but that's how you pull it all back together. By the string. And finally, when you shoot an arrow, you don't shoot it through your pinky fingers like this. You shoot it off the top of your hand. If you shoot it between your fingers, that's gonna hurt. And the way like traditional bows do it is they tilt the bow slightly to the right so the arrow doesn't fall off the bow because if you tilt it to the left, it's going to fall off. Tilt it slightly to the right and you pull back, and then you shoot it off the top of your hand. This could be a situation where this person never shot a bow and arrow in their life and they never looked at a reference photo. Or it could be some sort of generative AI situation going on where they painted over some generative AI that had this as the bow and arrow situation, which is why it looks so odd. Possible food for thought, right? But going about the commentary about the paint over or the photo bashing, that's personally what I think is happening in this situation. I think this artist is photo bashing a lot of the work together. And this person can paint. They have illustrations dating back to like 2022. Like here's some of their work from 2021, you know, where they can paint. They clearly can. But what I think is happening here is that they're doing a lot of photo bashing and painting over it. And as you can see here, this is an example, right, of the photo bashing where if you look at the background, you can see these are pictures of like plants, pictures of plants and trees and stuff. And they're all like photoshopped together to make the background. Now, is photo bashing a legit art technique? It is. And photo bashing is something that there are people who will use this. In my personal opinion, right, and everyone has their own opinion on things, a photo bashing can get kind of tricky in the sense that like if you don't have the rights to the images you're bashing together, we start treading into some copyright territory situations, which essentially would kind of make you like generative AI, no? Because it's doing essentially the similar thing, training off of a ton of different work that they didn't have licenses to and outputting a result, like bashing it together, making a final product. It's not exactly one-to-one. I hope you get my point. But that's the same thing with photo bashing. If you have the rights to all the pictures that you're bashing together and painting over, that's chill. If you don't have the rights, then we get to some slippery situations. But what I think is happening here is that they're photo bashing things together and painting over it. And some of the things they're photo bashing together are generative AI. And I think that's how we end up with some pieces that look like this, because I think the faces were photo bashed together. I think the hair was possibly painted over, but they painted a good chunk of the hair themselves. And that some of the clothing is photo bashed and some of it is painted over. Like the satin here looks photo bashed and it kind of looks like they found a trim to put over it. And then I think this middle corset waistline was photo bashed in and they painted in the highlight details. And then other pieces like this one, I think they just kind of took the entire body essentially of whatever allegedly AI generated and then kind of painted a little bit more details over it. So we get some blending happening here, etc. And painted the hair over. And that the face was maybe possibly a different face and the hood might be something else. And same thing for this, which is why I think we ended up with the 6 fingers here, because there was a body that was used, maybe a face that was pasted on, and the hair and the lighting painted on after. And some elements might be drawn in as well to add like a personal touch to make it more similar to the book character they were drawing. But I think personally, that's my thoughts as to what's happening, which is why some of the art pieces look more hand painted and why others have a much more like AI look to it. Like, right, going back to this piece, the armor, where I think, again, right, the armor was probably AI generated. They probably painted over some of the details. All the sword detail was painted over. All the purple was painted on. And then probably some of this flowing detail was also painted in. But you can see there was a lot of like AI stuff happening with the chainmail and the plate, the lion plate on the chest. And I think that's because there was probably some Gen AI used in this paint over process. So yeah, at the end of the day, I'm curious about your thoughts. What do you think is happening here? And again, please don't send hate to any parties involved. I think their Instagram is deleted now. There are a lot of people who think it's just photo bashing and that the errors that you're seeing is a result of the photo bashing, which is why it doesn't look like a fully drawn piece because there was photos added in. There's other people who think that there was generative AI used as well. I'm on that boat. I think there's some pieces that are just like that had no Gen AI used. And I think there's some that maybe had some Gen AI assistance that was painted over and stuff, possibly for like maybe more complicated outfits and things that was a little bit harder to find like a direct photo to then use. So again, curious about your thoughts. At the end of the day, don't send hate to any parties involved. My sunburn is slowly healing. I think it's getting a little more faint as the days go on, but dang, that looks bad. And yeah, check me out on Etsy. I also have a coffee with free resources, and I stream on Twitch 3 days a week, Mondays and Saturdays at 6 p.m. PST, and Thursdays at 7:30, where I do a podcast with my friend. So I hope to catch y'all there or in another video. Peace.